I mean, we're praising Chris Duarte, right? And he's been good. He's definitely added some defensive intensity in that starting lineup. But I think it also highlights, like, man, Kevin Huerter has really fallen off. I mean, his defense was terrible. His offense really wasn't that special either this season. And I think just replacing him with a guy who's going to bring it a little more on defense. And they're not really losing much on the offensive end with Duarte in there. It just shows how bad Huerter has been this year. And it's like, it brings up the other question. I mean, for me, it's like, is it time to move on from Kevin Huerter? Like, how much longer is this guy going to be in Sacramento? Because if Mike Brown is really trying to establish a defensive presence in Sacramento, and I think he should. But Kevin Huerter, man, I hope, and I don't know, I'm hoping, but I hope he's kind of gone at the trade deadline and that Monty can flip him for a defensive wing. I don't know if that's possible or not, but I think that's what this is all kind of made clear to me. Is like, dang, Kevin Huerter, he's got to go.
I think one of the things that facilitates that thought is the fact that, based on what I think Brown's thinking, I think if Duarte continues what he did against Orlando, which is fouling needlessly, if he keeps doing that, which I don't really necessarily think he will, because that was like a one-off game over the last couple where before that he was playing really well. So I think he'll hold on to his starting job for a few more games for sure. But even if he continues doing what he did against Orlando, I'm not convinced Mike Brown just reverts back to Huerter. I mean, why do that when it's Duarte's defense that has made a huge difference? And you wouldn't want to revert back to going with the offensive-minded player and hurting the defense. You're just going to end up back where you were. I mean, we've seen Huerter start a whole season last year, start however many this year, and not much has changed. Even if he keeps the negative attention off him defensively, it was a matter of time for it to come back, for things to catch up to him, for the season to start to wear on him and those issues to be exacerbated even more. So, honestly speaking, I think that if Duarte doesn't work out, and maybe this sounds crazy to some, but I don't really think it sounds too crazy, I wouldn't be surprised if Mike Brown went from Duarte to someone like Juan Toscano-Anderson or something like that. Maybe even Kessler Edwards. My point here is that it's clear what the focus needs to be here. It's clear what the weakness is for the team that needs to be worked on the most to make them go to the next level. It's defense. You're not going to get help defensively from Huerter. Can Huerter be some kind of a weapon off the bench? Maybe. But at that point, that's not even a sure thing. Trading Huerter has to be something that is being talked about. I mean, you got a guy that's making between $15 and $16 million a year that's now 9th or 10th man in the rotation. And he's sort of played that way. I mean, he's sort of earned his way into that role. And of course he's going to be okay with it. Of course he's all in on the situation. But, I mean, Herter's role is so minimal compared to the price he's paid. It's disproportional. That just seems like a no-brainer to have to move him. And you know, we were talking a lot over the last month or two, like, oh, Davion Mitchell's trade value is plummeting. And maybe that's not so much the case now, but he's never going to be somebody that their team was going to kind of offer something a little, we're going to go out of their way to go get him. Huerter's a little different. You know, Huerter's got his issues defensively, but he's still a hell of a basketball player. He's still a great offensive player. He's still got the track record of being one of the better shooters around. Teams need that, you know? And I do think that one of the things about his three-point struggles is that's still got to be affected by the amplified focus on the defensive end. And I feel like if you freed him up and got him somewhere else where they're not necessarily calling on him to do that as hard. I mean, of course, every coach is going to want him to defend, and he tries hard to do that. But I think if you kind of get him to a different team where they really need to maximize his offensive skill set and let him be that guy. I mean, he's going to return, I guess I should say, to being that, 40% 3-point shooter.
I think so too.
So I think it might actually help Huerter a lot to get traded, I guess is another way of putting it.
Just a little change in scenery.
But this whole idea of Huerter getting benched for Duarte was always a possibility. Ever since we saw Duarte get that preseason start and play really well with the starters, it just always seemed like, well, this is a possibility. And the question was, what's Huerter's role off the bench? Is he suited to be a good role player? Are they going to be able to maximize what they get out of him? And it's hard to do all that. So, I mean, unless Huerter can somehow miraculously become solid end to end in terms of never really having the sort of breakdowns defensively that we've seen in a high volume over the last games. I mean, you watched the early part of Atlanta. I think he had 3 mistakes in his 5 minutes, didn't play for the rest of the first half. He can really pile up defensive mistakes in a short amount of time. You say you want to see Huerter gone. I think that's a fair sentiment because, you can get something for him, and what you're going to be utilizing him as is just, it's not worth it for the price.
No.
And someone's going to want him.
Yeah, the dude's he can stretch the floor. He hasn't been doing the best job of it so far this year, but he's proven through his career. This is his 5th year now, I want to say. Maybe 5th or 6th year. But he's proven to be a very reliable 3-point shooter.